أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق الله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد طبتم وطابت لقاؤكم وأهلا وسهلا ومرحبا بكم في لقائنا هذا. And this is the first session in the first halaqah that Masjid As-Siddiq is doing. And the reason why we're doing depression is, well, many people are depressed. Too much people are depressed. Many of us have gone through depressing times. We have been through depressing events in our lives. And it's because of these things that we realize we need to address depression, because depression is not something easy. It's something that is deadly. And in every single khutbah that we hear at the end of that khutbah the following phrase, Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He commands justice, He commands equality. Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He commands excellence. Wa ita'i dhil qurba, and He commands being good to your relatives, good to your family. وَيَنْهَى, and He forbids al-fahsha, things that are lewd, things that are evil. وَالْمُنْكَرْ, things that are corrupt, things that are not valid. وَالْبَغْيُ, and He forbids, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbids transgression against others. So it's because of these things that when we think about depression, we realize that this falls under that category. All of these things are interconnected. So when we think about depression from the Islamic perspective, we want to protect and maintain our lives and our nobility. So today, inshallah, for this first session, we're going to do a quick crash course in Al-Maqasid. And we're going to find out exactly what the Maqasid is. Afterwards, we're going to dive into a brief summary or a brief explanation of the Islamic mental health. What does Islamic mental health entail exactly? And then afterwards, we're going to look at the underlying causes and examples of depression, especially in our Muslim American communities. Of course, all of these things will hit home here to us in Queens. So what is the Maqasid of the Shariah? The Maqasid of the Shariah is the overarching or the higher goals of the Shariah. Right? So we have a system of law in place. And we have a system of law in place where we have goals that we need to achieve. And this is one of those sciences that is maf'ood. It has been lost. Where people have written treatises about these things, such as Imam al-Shatibi rahimahullah, such as Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni rahimahullah, such as Yusuf al-Qaradawi rahimahullah. And these things have, while they have been written and they exist, this science of Islamic studies, this science of the Sharia has been lost. So in a way, we need to revive this science. And so the daruriyat is the essentials of the maqasid. These are 5 essentials. What are these 5 essentials? First, we have the protection of religion. And the protection of religion is the cornerstone of human existence. And it provides moral guidance and spiritual fulfillment. And it emphasizes the freedom to practice faith and enjoins the belief in Allah while prohibiting coercion in matters of religion. If we lived in a Muslim majority land or a Muslim dominated land, we cannot force a minority, a religious minority, to accept Islam. We cannot compel them to follow or become Muslim. They are allowed to follow their religion, whether it be external, such as Jews, such as Christians, such as Hindus, or whether it be internal. Ali radiallahu anhu, when he was the Khalifa, and he had to face one of these groups. He had to face the Kharijites, the Khawarij, who had a different aqidah than him, who had a different fiqh than him, who rebelled against him several times. And yet, Ali radiallahu anhu, he had the right to go and put down this rebellion. He had the right to snuff out this Khariji mentality, which will then later on become and morph into what you call the Shia movement. But these Kharijites, Ali radiallahu anhu did not snuff them out. He did not do anything for them. Instead, He allowed them to practice their Islam according to their own beliefs. So that freedom of religion is of utmost importance. There is no compulsion in forcing someone to become a Muslim. And we are protected by that. And the Sharia also comes and protects others' rights of religion just like this. And then next we have the protection of life. Hifdh al-nafs, the soul, the one's true self. And the sanctity of life is paramount in Islam, because every human life is sacred. Even our own blood is more sacred than the Kaaba. And its preservation is the primary objective of the Sharia, to protect life, to protect the sanctity of life, to protect the nobility of life, which is why capital punishment, the crime for capital punishment is so severe in Islam, right? The crime for haraba, for armed robbery, for attacking or deforming something, they are qisas laws, or laws that are very, very harsh. So the Sharia has come and has protected our life and our body. Then we have the protection of the intellect, hifdh al-aql. And our aql is our intellect. And alhamdulillah, we all have very great intellects. Alhamdulillah, I was looking at a lot of smart people here. One of the things that we need to do, and one of the things that the Sharia comes with, is that it protects our intellect to the degree where it has forbidden substances that affect our intellect. And then we have the protection of lineage, of family, and nasli. So hifdh al-nasli is the protection of family, of relations, of ties. And hifdh al-nasl, imagine if we were to determine how to divide up inheritance. Imagine if we were the ones that had to come up with a way in which we would have to get married, or we would have to make up our own laws of nikah and walima. So the Sharia has come with a guideline on how to live our lives, how to live a proper family life. And then lastly, we have the protection of wealth, hifdh al-mal, because mal, or wealth, right, is zinatul hayat ad-dunya. It's one of the pleasures of this world, of money, of children. So wealth is a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and its protection ensures economic stability and justice. That's why there's so much books and treatises being written on sariqah, on theft, on robbery, and why the crime for theft in Islam is so harsh. So the Sharia has come and has protected our wealth as well. And now if we look at the Maqasid today, we see that hifdh al-mal, hifdh al-aql, hifdh al-nasl, hifdh al-deen, wa hifdh al-nafs. All of these protections, they all tie into our true selves, our depression, our mental state. How can our mental state be good if we're living in poverty? How can our mental state be good if we're not practicing our religion and following the ritualistic ideals that it forces us to do, that it compels us to do? How can we not be depressed if we are not taking care of our lineage, or we're not going and taking steps to preserve our lineage and have a noble lineage and a noble family? So this is the practical relevance of the Maqasid today. And while this is something new that people are hearing about, the Maqasid of the Sharia, it is for contemporary issues. We use the Maqasid of the Sharia for contemporary issues. What is the underlying goal? If I said today, I want to fix the problem between Israel and Palestine, what would be the goal in that? Would I go and look at the Maqasid and look at the goal? Okay, hifdh al-nafs, hifdh al-nasl, hifdh al-aql. How do I protect sanctified life in Palestine? What would be the reason? What would an alim or a sheikh or one of the ulama or shura councils in this world, what would be their response? So this is one of the tools used to develop fatawa or verdicts. So we have justice and equality. We have flexibility and adaptability, where it offers an approach to interpreting Islamic law in light of changing circumstances. For instance, the modern financial systems. In most Muslim majority countries, there is such a thing as ijtihad al-jama'i, where there are experts in statistics, there's experts in finance, there's experts in economics, and then you have the traditional ulama also sitting on the same board. And then they all get together and they agree on one verdict, which is ijma' al-jama'i. And this is a new type of ijma' or ijtihad that the ulama can do. So we see the practical application of the maqasid. And how was this done in history? What proof do we have that this even existed? During the Khilafah of Umar ibn al-Khattab, a famine occurred. And because of this famine, people started to steal. And the crime for stealing is, what is the crime for stealing? What is that? Chopping your hand off, right? Your head or your hand? Okay. So chopping your hand off, right? Why did Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu chop off anyone's hand? He did his own ijtihad. He followed his own reasoning. Because the goal of the Sharia is to protect life. The goal of the Sharia is to protect dignity. The goal of the Sharia is to protect property. So if there's a famine, people are starving. If people are starving, people are going to be desperate. If people are desperate, then they're going to steal. So Umar ibn al-Khattab understood the wisdom of the Sharia. Also, Umar ibn al-Khattab, around the same time, he forbade marriage to the kitabiyat. Who are the kitabiyat? Women who are Jewish, women who are Christian. Why did he forbid this? Because of hifdhun nasl. The Sharia came with nobility in lineage, and we must protect our lineage. Why did he stop this? Because everyone was marrying the Christian and the Jewish woman. No one was marrying the Muslim woman. So Umar ibn al-Khattab, he had to make his own ijtihad, because for the greater good, for the overarching effect, the overarching goal of the Sharia is to preserve that Islamic lineage, that Muslim lineage. So we see the practicality of the maqasid of the Sharia. It represents the soul of Islamic law, because without goals, then where are we going? Without objectives, what are we really doing? We're praying and praying and praying, we're amassing hasanat. This is good. But at the end of the day, there needs to be goals. And these five goals is what you would call in a utopian vision, a 5-goal vision that we all must aspire to. Now, how many of you are depressed? Just one? No depressed people here? But Assalamu, we could just go home then. There's no need for this. We could just go home. There's not a lot of depressed people here. Fawaz, you depressed? You know? Fad, you depressed? Okay. Adam? Looking a little sad there, man. So depression. Who is depressed? Why are they depressed? How did they get so depressed, and how can we undepress them? Why hasn't anyone done this before? Why hasn't anyone talking about depression? I mean, how many khutbahs have been given in this masjid? How many khutbahs have been given in all of our masjids across our neighborhoods, our Guyanese, our West Indian neighborhoods, whether it be here or Florida or New Jersey? No one really speaks about depression. Why are we so afraid? Because we have mental health struggles. They're real. And they affect many of us, they affect the people around us. But because of stigmas, lack of awareness, and sometimes even misunderstandings of our own religion, these struggles remain hidden. So we have a stigma around mental health. We have a stigma around mental health. So this stigma around mental health, when you hear about a stigma, what do you mean? What do you think of? Can anyone tell me? Around mental health. If I say a stigma around mental health, what does this mean? Anyone? Anyone? Okay. We're off to a great start here, guys. So you're ashamed, right? So that's exactly right, right? We're ashamed. We're ashamed of mental health. We're ashamed of talking about mental health. I don't want anyone to know what's going on in my head, right? That's the attitude of many of us and our parents and our grandparents. We have that type of attitude. So many health issues, they're seen as taboo, right? Growing up in a Guyanese home, a Trinidad home, in a Pakistani home, this is how it's going to be, where mental health issues are seen as taboo. Depression is linked as a character flaw. And this is what many of our parents and grandparents used to think about. Depression, if you're depressed, oh, go take a walk or something. It's a character flaw. right? And we view it as a character flaw. This was one of the mistakes that the past generations did. Or maybe you have lack of willpower, or maybe you're just not that good of a Muslim. So when these things happen, leaders, imams, shuyukh, they don't know how to address this, because they don't want to feel that they're telling people that they lack willpower. They don't want people to feel small, and they themselves don't want to do that or cause that. So many clergymen, like imams, they address mental health openly, but if they did that, then it might diminish their role of spiritual solutions. Because if you go to an imam, what am I going to tell you? I'm going to say, hey, you need to pray more. You need to read Qur'an more. Or you're depressed, make sujood. But then your depression is still going to be there. You might feel a little better, but you're still going to be depressed. So we have a stigma around mental health. Why else don't we talk about this? We don't talk about this because of a perceived conflict with faith. Because many people view it as a spiritual issue. Many imams will say, no, you're lacking iman. It's an iman issue, and that's all there is to it. There's no reason for your brain to be feeling depressed. There's no reason for you to be feeling down, right? So there's a perceived conflict with faith, where we're perceiving that because we're depressed, or because someone is depressed, they're just a bad Muslim. So we have that as well. And then also we have the lack of training or knowledge, where many religious leaders, many imams, they're not trained in psychology. They're not trained in mental health. And because of that, they feel unequipped, and they are unequipped to deal with these challenges. It's very easy for me to tell someone, hey, you need to make dua more, man. You need to go and fast more, or you need to fast on Mondays and Thursdays and pray your sunnah more. Maybe, inshallah, you'll feel better. It's very easy for me to say that. But if I was to go and help you through one of the most traumatic experiences in your life that you still think of in your 30s, and this happened to you when you're 11, then you see the issue. An imam cannot be equipped to do that unless he has that type of training. And then you have the focus on spiritual solutions, where many imams or many elderly people in our community, our grandparents, their grandparents, or even our parents, they focused on more spiritual solutions, where fasting and prayer, this was all we would hear. Right? We need to rely on Allah. If we have more tawakkul on Allah, we're just going to feel amazing. And it's true, we need to have tawakkul on Allah. We need to rely on Allah. But at the end of the day, our depression is still going to be there. So how do we reconcile? And then, of course, you have the cultural norms. The cultural norms or generational gaps, where older generations may view mental health issues as a Western phenomenon. God forbid if it's a Western phenomenon. God forbid if it was something made in America, right? So as a modern or a Western phenomenon. And this doesn't align with our Islam. So if we're going to go and see that, okay, more attention to depression is an American thing, many of our elder generations, they're not going to want anything to do with it. This is new. This is Western. That means automatically it is just bad. We need to throw it out the window. And then, of course, we have the fear of community backlash, where leaders in the community, they fear the backlash from its community because this might be perceived as non-religious issues. And they only want people in the masjid to talk about religious issues, to talk about iman, to talk about taqwa, to talk about tawakkul. But no one wants to hear, or maybe no one wants to hear anyone in the masjid talk about mental health or depression. So these type of discussions, they require time, they require energy, and they require depth and empathy, especially when we're dealing and we're surrounded with people who are depressed. And you just look around, people are not happy. People are not happy with the way this country is going. People are not happy in their lives. People are not happy in their relationships. People are just not happy. Why are they not so unhappy? And there's a multitude of reasons, and we will get into it, inshallah. So the fear of community backlash. And then also limited platforms of dialogue, where there's no workshops being done on depression. There are no lectures being done on depression. And if they are, they're only for the adults. Or if they are, then it's not adding up. It's not enough. So, and many clergymen, many leaders, they might come from other countries and they lack the vocabulary, they lack the wording, they lacked the experience to speak about traumatic issues with people. So this is another issue as well. So this is why it's so hard. And then we also have the non-compliance of the Maqasid approach, where community leaders, they don't have a vision or the goal of the Maqasid, right? So this is the Maqasid approach, where we need to find ways on how to achieve those goals. We have the goals in front of us. What are the steps we take now? Or what is the exceptions we make? Where we can go, or where can we fine tune? Where we can meet those goals? Like Ali met his goal, radiallahu anhu. Or where Umar ibn al-Khattab met his goal, radiallahu anhu. How do we reconcile the way they reconciled? So the Maqasid serves as a lens where we're looking through this telescope, this Maqasid telescope, and we're seeing what we need to get done, but then we now need to determine what needs to be done in order to get where we need to go. And then of course, we have a generational disconnect. A generational disconnect where religious leaders may not recognize the mental health challenges faced by younger generations, especially in Western context. And this is very true. Only in the 90s, people did not understand the way they understand now about depression. The stigma around it was just, let's just sweep it under the rug. If you saw someone who was being depressed, you would just leave them alone. So depression is very real, and depression is something that needs to be spoken about. Depression does not. So what do? What is the point of all of this? We're speaking about why this isn't being spoken about enough. So what do? We need to encourage our religious leaders, our community leaders, to see themselves as part of the solution. Where instead of just coming and giving a talk, instead they're actually engaging and actually trying to understand it themselves. Because that's the problem we have. We have mashayikh, we have a'imma, and they do not understand depression. They do not understand mental health, mental stigmas. They do not understand that. So they need to see themselves as part of the solution and educate themselves so that we can all be educated. So workshops with mental health professionals, as we will come to inshallah, as integrating mental health awareness into sermons, into khutbahs. So this is something that we can all do and what you can all do as well. So depression does not discriminate. It affects people of all backgrounds, or is it just Guyanese people? I mean, let's be honest, guys. We're pretty miserable, huh? We're a pretty miserable group. Okay, that's really sad. You guys just agreed with me. Gosh, it's pretty depressing. I'm gonna need to come there and listen to me. So it affects people of all backgrounds, right? Ages, genders, and levels of faith. Whether it be the Muslim that just became Muslim today or a Muslim who was born Muslim 20 years ago. So it affects all of these things. So we're going to talk about it, right? There's no Muslim depression, Jewish depression, Christian depression. There is none of that. So let's talk about depression. What even is depression, right? When I say depression, what do I mean? What do I mean by depression? Just being sad? Is that it? Just being sad? I can cry and be sad. I might not be depressed. A state in my mind? So that's true. So it's like a state in your mind, right? It's like a monkey on your back. You could tell me the most funniest joke and I'll laugh out with you, but then at the same time, as soon as you're done with the joke, I go back to that state, right? So depression is persistent sadness. It can be a state of mind, a loss of interest in activities, right? Your appetite will change. Your sleeping patterns will change. You have fatigue. You feel worthless. And you have difficulty concentrating. These are just some of the things. And of course, it can lead to cutting yourself. It can lead to hurting yourself, self-harm. And it can also lead to suicide. How many of the young people in our communities, not just this community, but all of the Guyanese masjids, all of the West Indian masjids, how many kids have cut themselves? A lot. A lot of kids have cut themselves. A lot of kids have been crying and cutting themselves in their bathrooms. And the religious leadership does nothing or does not address it. So this is a start for Masjid As-Siddiq to start addressing these type of things. So not simply sadness or a temporary mood fluctuation, it's a serious condition that requires understanding and compassion. And of course, professional help. So Islamic mental health. Let's talk about Islamic mental health first. And this is going to be a crash course in Islamic mental health. Is there even such a thing? Why can't we just talk about mental health? But no, because we're Muslims and we always say proudly and strongly that our religion is the truth. So anything that our religion touches will also be better. And we know that if every single person, or let's say America decided to enact Sharia law as part of its governance throughout democracy, we have Sharia. Undoubtedly, we would say proudly that every single person would benefit, every single person would flourish. But of course, that's not the world we live in. So is there even such a thing as Islamic mental health? So scholars like Al-Razi, Fakhruddin Al-Razi, rahimahullah, one of the greatest scholars of Islam, and Ibn Sina, rahimahullah, wrote extensive treatises about mental and emotional well-being. And their works acknowledge the interconnectedness of the body, the mind, and the soul. Ibn Sina's Canon of Medicine, which is one of the greatest medical textbooks, also even studied in Harvard. It includes detailed discussions on mental disorders and their treatments. And now hospitals all over the Muslim world provide care for both physical and mental ailments, integrating spiritual support into their practices. So the Maqasid comes and gives us a way out. Where we have depressed people, they have ailments, they're suffering. We don't know what's causing them to be depressed. But we have spiritual remedies, but not just spiritual remedies. Not just spiritual remedies. So the foundations of Islamic mental health rest on key principles of Islamic theology and psychology, such as what? The concept of the fitrah. And what is the fitrah? Can anyone tell me what the fitrah is? So the fitrah is our disposition, right? Our natural inclination to things. A man has roles to play. A woman has roles to play. A child has roles to play. A parent has roles to play. Genders have roles to play, right? There's no non-binary people here, right? It's just men and women? Okay. We could put up another barrier if you. So men and women, they have roles to play, right? So that is the concept of the fitrah. Because every individual is created with an innate disposition. And this is the foundation of mental health, that you know your role. You know what you're supposed to be doing with your life. You have a plan, and you're trying to achieve that plan. So you have an inclination, right? A man has his own inclination, a woman has her own inclination. Now, if we were to switch that up, if I was going to put on a kimar and an abaya and sit down next to these sisters, things will get weird, right? And if vice versa, things would get pretty weird, right? So when those things happen and things get interchanged, those roles get interchanged, what happens is it opens up the door for a huge problem, right? Depression is one of those problems. So we have the fitrah, right? The innate disposition or the natural inclination of people, of Muslims. And then after that, we have the nature of the self, the nafs, the anfus. And what is this nafs? And I spoke about this in a khutbah a few weeks ago. Islamic psychology, right? Ilm al-nafs al-Islami divides the nafs into 3 parts. An-nafs al-amara bis-su', which is the worst part. Because amara bis-su', you are like a beast. You're like an animal. You just follow your desire wherever it is. You have no morals, you have no boundaries, you have no limits. So this is nafs al-amara bis-su'. And then you have an-nafs al-lawwama, the soul, where the soul does something wrong or you do something wrong, but there's something in your head blaming you for it. So it's the soul that blames. لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بالنفس اللوامة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by this nafs because most of his creation has this nafs, where most of his creation is not innately evil, but we mess up sometimes and we have a conscience. We have that voice in the back of our head saying, hey, something is wrong here. You're not doing the right thing. Or you feel that guilt or remorse. So this is al-nafs al-lawwama. And most of us have this nafs. And then we have the best nafs, which is nafs al-mutma'inna, the soul that is tranquil, or the self that is tranquil, the self that is content. That it tries its best to follow the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when it falls short, it just tries again, and it repents to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and turns back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just like this, the ideal state of inner peace is achieved. Because with this state, this is the state in which we want every depressed person to reach. An-nafs al-mutma'inna, where at-tam'anina is you have tranquility. You reach a state of contentment. Are depressed people content? Can you be content and depressed? I don't think so. A depressed person will always want more, or he's depressed or she's depressed because something didn't happen that they wanted to happen. So they're not content. The inner self is not content. So we need to get from al-amara bis-su' to lawama, and from lawama to al-mutma'inna. And then thirdly, we have balance, al-mizan. وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ أَلَّا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has raised the heavens and has put the scale for balance. So balance in our holistic well-beings. The Quran emphasizes the concept of balance in all aspects of life. And it focuses on achieving equality between physical and emotional and spiritual concepts. So now that that's out of the way, the crash course, we're going to go on to the causes of depression. What causes us to be depressed? Can someone please tell me? Can someone please tell me? What causes us to be depressed? Maybe I didn't get something I want. Maybe I feel pressured to do something. I didn't get something I want. Can any of the sisters tell me? You're feeling worthless. You're not feeling good enough. Okay. Being in debt. Okay. Are you in debt? Okay. So the number one cause, and these are just some causes, but number one causes that speak to us as Muslim Americans. Number one is attributing depression to weak faith, where we think we're depressed, but we think it's because we're a bad Muslim. Or we see someone depressed, right? Or God forbid, our own children, and we think that something is wrong with these kids and their iman. They need to pray more. So this is the wrong way to go. So in many Islamic communities, they're told that their condition stems from a lack of faith, iman, or sufficient prayer. For example, a person expressing symptoms of depression might hear comments like, if you pray more, your sadness will go away. Or if you're feeling this way because you're not trusting Allah enough, turn back to Allah, trust Allah, your depression will magically go away. It's true, you need to turn to Allah. It's true, you always trust in Allah. It's true, you always complain to Allah. But at the end of the day, we need to take steps to manage the things that are wrong with us. Just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you need to trust in Allah, but we also need to tie our camel. So we need to take steps. True tawakkul in Allah is not just saying, Allahu Akbar, oh Allah, please help me, and then do nothing and sit down. No, you need to have a step, you need to have a plan, you need to follow through with some things. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide you through that. But if you do nothing and then you will expect nothing in return. So this is true tawakkul. So for example, we have a woman, she lives in a neighborhood, she experiences symptoms with depression, she has sadness, she has low energy, she loss of interest, loss of appetite. She shared her struggles with a family member. And then they suggest that her problem is due to a lack of spiritual devotion. She needs to pray more. She needs to read Qur'an more. Maybe she's mixing with men a lot. She needs to stop that. She needs to be with the women more. She needs to maybe cover up more. So this advice is rooted in the belief that faith can cure all, and that she is feeling guilty for not doing enough religiously. And it make her even harder for her to receive professional help. So this is the stigma surrounding her condition. So she feels like she needs to pray harder. She needs to pray way more nawafil in the night. She needs to read extra Qur'an. She needs to make dua until her hands bleed. So this type of thing. So this is one of these real life examples where we need to fix this. Another cause is the belief in supernatural causes. We're all Guyanese, so we all heard those jinn stories. Many of them I don't think are true. Some of them might be. But we're all Guyanese, so we heard those jinn stories. There was a case one time where someone was telling me they thought this guy was possessed by a jinn in Guyana. And they proceeded to beat the hell out of him the entire night until this guy had to end up in the emergency room in the hospital in Guyana. The guy was just having a moment. He wasn't possessed by a jinn. But immediately, that's our stigma, right? Everything is a jinn. If this thing falls down, it's a jinn. If this thing stopped working, it has to be the jinn. So, it's sometimes attributed to jinn possession or the evil eye. right? We see someone doing something wrong or feeling some type of way. We're not unsure what's going on with them. Someone must have put the eye on him, right? So this is the issue as well. So this is another cause of depression. So we have a middle-aged man from Guyana. He begins to feel increasingly fatigued. His family believes that his symptoms are a result of being possessed by a jinn. The family takes him to a religious healer who performs a ruqyah. And what happens? He experiences temporary relief. But at the end of the day, no one said he really had a jinn. He was just depressed. So because of this, he thinks he needs to go to this raqi and that raqi and that raqi. But depression is never really addressed. Yes? By amulets, it's not that what you're thinking of. I know what you're thinking of. By amulets, meaning like you're putting Qur'an in like water, this type of thing. So you're not swinging the tabij, or if that's what you're thinking of. So in some communities, mental health issues like depression are viewed as a source of family shame. This is another cause. We're ashamed of our children because they're cutting themselves. I don't want anyone to know my son or my daughter is cutting themselves in the bathroom, right? Or popping pills in the bathroom, all right? Or crying over their boyfriend in 10th grade or their girlfriend in 10th grade. We need to somehow find a way to address that, right? So it's viewed as a source of family shame. A family hiding a member's depression in order to protect their reputation for fear that it might affect marriage prospects for others in the family. Nusayba, are you depressed? Because if you are, you're never going to get married. Individuals avoiding discussing their struggles because they fear being labeled as crazy or weak-minded. So if you're depressed, you have this aura about you, this attitude or this environment about you, you're looked at funny. You're looked at in a certain way. So for example, a mother in her mid-30s, she experiences postpartum depression right after the birth. She feels overwhelmed. She's disconnected from her baby because of the postpartum, but she doesn't tell her husband or her family, as she believes they will view her as inadequate as a mother. And does this really hit home for you guys or not? It doesn't hit home? Are you guys going to admit it? Okay, well, let's just assume. Maybe not. But what happens is a close friend encourages her to seek therapy. It's only when someone goes and encourages her to seek therapy, that's when she does it. But if there's no one encouraging her to seek the therapy, what happens? Oh, I'm just gonna shut up about it. I'm gonna be disconnected from my baby. I'm gonna go through this postpartum depression. I'm not gonna tell my husband. I'm not gonna tell anyone. I'm not gonna exhaust any of the sources giving to me. So this is another cause as well, and this is another real life scenario. Then we have gender-specific stigma, where women in particular may face stigma. For example, you're the same thing where a postpartum depression might be dismissed by being told to be grateful for her child, rather than receiving empathy and understanding and medical care. So you just need to be grateful for your child. Or telling a woman, oh, something is wrong going on with your marriage, you're depressed because of something, just be grateful that you have this. Or be content you have that. How many women are sisters in our community, they face this issue. It's not being addressed. So they might also feel silenced or judged for admitting to mental health struggles, especially if they are expected to embody resilience or emotional stability. Do you guys feel silenced? Do you all feel silenced? Sisters, do you guys feel silenced at all? Do you feel you can speak freely, or do you feel silenced? Yeah, like right now. Do you feel silenced? You feel silenced? Okay. So this is a patriarchal setting, right? All right. I was making a joke, but all right. Tough crowd. So a young woman, so then we have another scenario here. A young woman from a conservative Islamic family or community, she feels drained and depressed after years of caring for her sick father and younger siblings, right? And then she hides her condition or her depression from others for fear of being seen as weak. So in this scenario, the woman has to be strong, right? Because if she's seen as weak, what happens? The entire episode, the entire system falls apart. Because if she's being seen as weak, then the children will view her as weak. What are they going to do? They're going to misbehave. More problems start to pile on and pile on and pile on until you're emotionally and mentally overwhelmed. right? Might hear things as, this is just a phase, your depression is just normal. It's normal stress for a woman, causing her to feel even more isolated. So a next cause is community judgment, where people in communities may judge others for seeking therapy and using antidepressants, and seeing it as a sign of abandoning reliance on Allah. Such as a person taking antidepressants might face comments like, why would you need medicine when you have the Qur'an to heal you? Right? Why would you need to take these pills or you have the Qur'an? The Qur'an will just heal all. It's true, the Qur'an does heal all. The Qur'an does heal all. The Qur'an does have all the answers, but not in the way you think. The Qur'an has all the answers. The Qur'an answers every single question, but you still need to meet the Qur'an halfway. You still need to live and embody the Qur'an for the Qur'an to actually work for you. But many people don't understand this. They just take it at face value. Take this book, read this book, and then magically your depression might be cured. So then we also have workplace and community discrimination, where in Islamic majority societies, individuals with depression might face discrimination, such as because of your mental health condition, you might be perceived as weak. Or maybe an imam. Just the other day in Texas, there was an imam who has been with this very well-known masjid for over 20 years. It was then found out that he had some type of slow dementia that was going to kick in maybe in the future. Immediately, as the board heard this, they fired him on the spot. So there was a big outcry, and it even reached the news, because things got nasty. So community members or even imams, even religious clergymen, even community leaders, if they're depressed, right, then what's going to happen? What's the public going to think about them? If I'm depressed right now, and you guys all know I'm depressed, am I going to be sitting up here? No, right? It's just going to be weird. So like businessmen, for example, we have businessmen who, they start to be depressed, they start to lose hope. They feel hopelessness, right? And his peers, his employees, people who is under him, they look up to him. This is our leader. He's the boss. We need to follow this man. But if they know that he is depressed, what's going to happen? Problems are going to start, right? Because that's the human nature of people. So he hides it, and it leads him to avoid therapy and medication. And he prolongs his suffering because he does not want people to find out that he has a mental issue, that he has depression. And then we also have the religious leader's role, where depression is sometimes is caused by the role of a religious leader or the community leader. While many imams and religious leaders, they have a positive influence, some may perpetuate that stigma. How? Because they focus on the spiritual rather than the medical solutions to mental health issues. One, we're supposed to be focusing on both the spiritual and the medical solutions. In communities where imams hold significant influence, their words can shape how people are perceive and deal with depression. This is why if you look at the Desi community, the Pakistani, Bangladeshi community, many of those young people, young women, young men, they are depressed and they're going through these things because they're not addressed in their masajid. They were not addressed at home. If you were to only go to a Pakistani parent from Pakistan who immigrated here and you were to say, hey, you know what, Dad, you know what, Mom, I'm depressed, what would be the outcome of that? I think everyone here can imagine that, right? The awkwardness. So kids they don't want to do that. And then it's being perpetuated and re-perpetuated by the religious leader. So, for example, a man seeks advice from his local imam after feeling constantly sad and detached from his life. So if I go to Imam Shan and I go to Imam Shan and I say, hey, Imam Shan, I'm so sad, I'm so depressed. And then he says to me, you know what, Raihaan, you need to make more dua. You need to increase your prayers. This advice is good. This is good advice. I need to be praying more. I need to be making constant dua. I need to remember Allah. That is good. That might help a little bit. But I'm neglecting my professional counseling. I'm neglecting going to see a therapist who is licensed, who is experienced to deal with what I'm going through. The imam at the masjid will not help me by just telling me to go pray or make dua. I have to do those things, yes. But overall, I'm still suffering. And then we have generational conflicts, right? Where younger generations of Muslims in the US may struggle with balancing their cultural identity. And this can create feelings of confusion, especially when there are disagreements with family members over issues of tradition and modernity. How many times have we been a part of this, where tradition versus modernity clashes, especially in our households? This causes depression because they want to reconcile, the kids, the young people, they want to reconcile religious identity, that they are Muslim, with their cultural identity, that they're American, right? So this involves navigating, am I American first, am I Muslim first? I'm Muslim first, then I'm American second. But then in what scenario does one come after the other? When am I really American? When am I really Muslim? What are the people outside of the masjid or outside of an Islamic school going to think of me, right? So one is rooted in Islamic traditions, and the other is rooted in secular American society. So this generational conflict does create a big problem with depression. And then of course we have Islamophobia and discrimination. For example, a young Muslim woman who wears the hijab might face daily microaggressions, right? Or outright hostility, leading to chronic stress and emotional exhaustion. When I was working at a hotel, when I used to work back in 2014, I had a coworker, and the first time I met this guy, we were sitting down, and he asked me, "Oh, so you look Muslim? Are you Muslim?" And it was an all Guyanese guy. So I said, "Yeah, I am Muslim." So he's like, "Hey, you guys read the Quran, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, we do." He's like, "They gotta rewrite that one," and then he walked off. So that was my first day at work, right? So that didn't make me depressed, but imagine how someone facing that could be depressed, right? They gotta rewrite that one. So since the events of 9/11, many American Muslims have faced increased scrutiny, discrimination, suspicion. We all know this. We live in this world. We're all awake. We understand. Everywhere we go, we face some sort of this, right? But many struggle with the question of whether they're truly accepted as American or whether they're viewed as outsiders due to their religion. Fahd, you're Muslim or you're American? Oh, you both? Okay. Right? So like a 19-year-old college student decides to wear the hijab as a sign of her faith. However, she faces criticism from both Muslim and non-Muslim people. Some of her Muslim peers criticize her for not wearing it correctly, right? What do they call it? The camel bun or something? There was a big outcry about that a few years ago, right? So you're not wearing your hijab correctly, or you're not fitting in, or the other side might say you're not fitting in with the more modern, the Americanized Muslim girl image. On the other hand, she experiences occasional prejudice from non-Muslim classmates and professors who view her hijab as a symbol of oppression. So there's so much tension here. You're being pulled in one direction where, hey, you're not religious enough, you're not wearing it properly. Then you're getting pulled in the other direction. Why aren't you wearing it? Why aren't you wearing it this way? Right? We're Americans, we're supposed to wear it this way. And then you have another thing where no matter what, you're suffering and people are looking down on you. Right? As a Muslim, hijabi or muhajjiba living in the United States. And then we also have political identity and advocacy, where we find ourselves caught between our faith and our political beliefs and our role as citizens in a democratic society. And this is they say this is a democratic society, right? So, any Democrats here? Any Democrats, any Republicans? You guys are just Muslim, huh? It's really leading into this Muslim thing. Okay. So they find themselves caught between their faith and their political beliefs. Such like, for example, there's so much polarization going on with LGBT, as we will come to later on in the year, or even things like foreign policy, immigration, all of these things, and I have seen this myself. People really, they get so caught up with these things in their own head, they make themselves depressed, right? So political identity and advocacy. Are you on the right? Are you in the left? Are you in the middle? At the end of the day, these things do cause people to develop depression, especially Muslims. So to overcome depression, we need a multifaceted approach that combines spiritual, emotional, and practical strategies, right? So here are some of the detailed steps we take. Number one, we acknowledge the problem. We recognize that depression is real and it is not a sign of weak faith. We educate ourselves and others about its symptoms and its causes. and we start conversations in our homes and our communities to break that stigma. I know that sounds a lot easier than done. I understand that, right? How many of us can go to our parents or think back to when we were 15 or 10 and we go up and say, hey, mom and dad, this is what happened. I cut myself in the bathroom. I knew of a girl who cut herself in the bathroom and kept cutting herself and she was only 12. She was only 12 when she did this. And her mother found out and caught her cutting herself in the bathroom. Self-harm. She was so depressed, so distraught something happened at school. Do you know what that mother did? That mother beat her. That mother beat her because she was suffering. What happens? It's suffering upon suffering upon suffering. Nothing gets fixed. Everything, it goes down the drain, right? So we don't want to be in a situation where that happens, or even hear again about a situation where that happens. So we turn to Allah, and of course the Imam is telling you guys to turn to Allah, but we must turn to Allah, where we engage in dua and dhikr, but that's not the only thing we engage in. We do need help, as we will come to. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to say, "Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from anxiety and from grief." So we look at things in the Quran that brings us comfort, such as whoever puts their faith or their trust in Allah, He will suffice. وَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ, right? وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. That whoever puts their trust in Allah, He will suffice them. But like I said, real trust, tawakkul, is not just sitting down and waiting for Allah to help you because you begged and cried Him to help you. That's not tawakkul. Tawakkul is begging and crying to Allah to help you, but then at the same time, you're taking steps to go. If you're depressed and you're begging Allah to take away your depression, why am I feeling like this? I feel like my brain is just fried. I don't know why I'm sad all the time. And then you're actually going and making those appointments with a therapist. That is tawakkul. Not sitting at home, eating Cheetos, and then you think your depression is just going to go away. And then, of course, seek professional help, where we reach out to licensed mental health professionals, ideally those who understand your cultural and religious background. And this is a problem where we look at people who they don't have the same background or culture as us. And what happens is we might get some semblance of an answer, but we don't get the entire answer. So inshallah, next week for the next session of the halaqah, I will be having a guest, and many of you know her. Her name is Sadia Jungali Rahim. And she will be joining me up here, inshallah, where we will be having a back and forth. And we're going to be speaking about how we exactly overcome depression, how we exactly tackle depression. So therapy and counseling can be life-changing. So then, of course, we take care of our physical health, right? And we educate the community. Of course, I need to follow that as well. But you have to exercise, maintain a healthy diet, prioritize sleep. Many people are depressed because they're fat. I'm pretty fat, but I'm not depressed, just letting you guys know. But many people, they're fat and they get depressed, right? Sabrina, we ate a lot in that plane, right? We were not depressed at all. We were not depressed at all. Studies have shown that physical activity can significantly reduce symptoms of depression. Yes, be physical. Masjids and Islamic centers should host workshops and talks on mental health to break the stigma, and that's exactly what we are doing and we plan to do, inshallah, this week, next week, and the other week. Bithnillahi ta'ala. And then, of course, we have the spiritual remedies. We have seeking professional help, and we have social support. Now, the social support thing is a little hard because, like I said, and even now, many of our elders don't understand the stigma of depression. Many of our elders do not understand it whatsoever. They weren't taught it as a kid. And while we don't blame them, we do not blame them whatsoever. They did what they had to do. But in their time, in their childhood, in their youth, this was not the problem that it now is, right? There were other things in society that they needed to handle. So they might not have that air that you need. They might not lend that air that you need in terms of speaking to them about social support. I don't think I can go to my grandparents or anyone can go to their grandparents that I know and have a deep conversation about mental health, right? It's not feasible. It's just not going to work because it's two different eras. It's two different cultures. So while the Quran itself does not label depression as a medical condition, It provides timeless guidance for dealing with emotional struggles. Through themes of hope and reliance on Allah and patience and gratitude, it addresses the psychological needs of individuals and encourages both spiritual and practical solutions. So, inshallah, next week we will focus on those practical solutions. But as for the spiritual solutions, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he faced immense grief. He would cry and cry and cry during the Am al-Huzn, after the loss of his dear wife Khadija radiallahu anha, our mother, and his uncle Abu Talib. And these were two people that were his lifelines. Those were his rocks. And he lost both of them within a year. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed those verses to console you. Did we not expand for you your heart? And we removed you from your burden, which had weighed upon your back. So he faces immense grief, right? And we see in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a compassionate Lord. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ghafoor ar-Rahim. So when we are in grief and we are crying and returning to Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will respond to us. Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he expressed fear and anxiety when he heard the command that you have to go back and face Fir'aun. You have to go back and face that tyrant. Obviously, if you were to tell me to go, I have to go and speak to Donald Trump tomorrow. I'm not going to go. I'm going to be very terrified, right? And confront him. So when he was commanded to confront this evil man, Fir'aun, he said, "My Lord, expand for me my breast. Make me braver. Give me that confidence and ease for me my task." This is tawakkul. This is real tawakkul, where he is trusting on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's not going to be easy. He has to go face one of the most vile human beings that ever existed, which is Fir'aun. So how do you think he's feeling? So this is true tawakkul or reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has also experienced moments of deep sadness, moments of grief, of struggle. And it says here similar to what we describe as depression today. No, they were absolutely 100% depressed. Ali radiallahu anhu, when he was Khalifa, his beard was long and he would pull out his hair and his beard would be soaked with tears. And he's Khalifa, he's the king. He is the Khalifa, he is Amir al-Mu'mineen. But why? He is so overworked and overburdened. He has to deal with the Kharijites in Baghdad. Then he has to deal with Syria. He's facing imminent civil war from a fellow Sahabi, Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. A fellow Sahabi is waging war against him. So all of these things, he can't sleep. So he goes in the middle of the night and he just walks around his house. And he's just pulling out hair from his beard. Ya dunya ghuri ghayri. Ya dunya ghuri ghayri. Oh world. Oh, he's speaking to the world. Why are you after me so much? Ghuri ghayri. Why are you after me so much? Leave me alone. This is how depressed he was. And he was one of the best of the Sahaba. Who is the best of mankind. So the term depression, they were absolutely depressed. How they dealt with life's challenges, how they had to leave their families in struggle, how they had to leave their families and go and fight against the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah, we will be speaking more about the Sahaba and how they overcame depression. In our next session, we'll be speaking about some examples of the Prophet and how they overcame depression. And we will be speaking about how to overcome depression itself, not just with spiritual approaches, but also with practical and scholarly approaches. And inshallah, Sister Sadia will be joining me next Sunday, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So just to recap, we had a crash course in the Maqasid of the Shariah, those 5 main higher goals of the Shariah. And then after that, we spoke about Islamic mental health and what it entails, how it affects our nafs, and what type of nafs we must have in order to overcome depression, in order to make a statement that we are no longer depressed. And then also that everything is balanced. There must be a balance in this world. If people's roles were reversed, or people's responsibility was reversed, we would be in chaos. So we will discuss these elements of Qur'an and the Sunnah and how the Qur'an and Sunnah can help with depression. And then we will also see what our special guest has in store for us next week بإذن الله تعالى. أقول قولي هذا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.